members of the press. My name is Joseph Africano Bartel, Secretary of Environment, Minister of Environment and Forestry, and the NDA for the Green Climate Fund for South Sudan. I'd like to inform you that the Executive Director of the Green Climate Fund was invited by the President of the Republic to visit South Sudan, so that we have meetings and discussions on the impacts of climate change in the country. The Green Climate Fund is one of the largest climate finance agency, and they are supporting countries that are party to the Paris Agreement with mitigation and adaptation projects. So, as you all know, South Sudan is one of the most vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change. In the past 5 years, we had flooding in northern Upper Nile, Unity, and other 6 states. We also have droughts, and now we are also experiencing the heat wave that have resulted in the closure of schools in the country. So the Green Climate Fund is here to meet us and to discuss with us what kind of funding they will be able to help us with. We as a country have developed a country program that requires up to $639 million. So we prioritize projects, energy generation, adaptation such as smart agriculture, and capacity building. So the Executive Director and the team are here from South Korea. They arrived yesterday, and they will be, and it's a 5-day mission. So we'll be meeting with different stakeholders. Today we'll have a whole government meeting with ministers and with the civil society. Tomorrow we'll have a trip to Bentiu. Then on Wednesday we'll be meeting with international partners, then also with the private sector. So it's a mission which is really very important for the country, because with this we'll be able to access climate finance for mitigation and adaptation projects in the country. Stephanie.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary. I'm Stephanie. I head special initiatives for the Green Climate Fund, and we are very privileged and grateful to have received the invitation from the President of South Sudan to make the first visit of the Green Climate Fund to South Sudan. We have been very warmly welcomed, including by the temperature, and I can acknowledge that we really are in the middle of a very strong heat wave. We're excited to be here because the Green Climate Fund functions almost like a bridge to honour the promise made by the Paris Agreement between developed countries and the contribution of $100 billion for climate action in developing countries. The Green Climate Fund is the financing mechanism for that promise. We have more than $17 billion committed around the world, which makes us the largest multilateral climate fund. And we are particularly concerned with funding to the most vulnerable communities and underserved countries. Countries that may be experiencing fragility, conflict, and the climate crisis at the same time. So we are very, very aware of South Sudan's vulnerabilities, and the Undersecretary has already spoken about flooding, drought, heat waves, and insecurity. All those things come together in South Sudan, making it one of the countries that the Green Climate Fund is most interested to invest in. We don't currently invest in a single country project here. So this is a new experience for us, and we're here to say we want to bring climate investment to South Sudan, and climate investment that is driven by the government's priorities and that builds the government's capacities to deliver long-term on climate action. At the heart of the way we function is to listen and respond to countries' needs and to support the government to choose the right partner to deliver on those needs. The science doesn't lie. The experience of vulnerable communities, millions and millions of people in South Sudan, does not lie. And we are here to say that we see what has to happen, and we are committed to making sure that climate action investment flows quickly and efficiently to South Sudan. So to be very clear, at this stage, we are not financing any single country project in South Sudan. As I said, this is our first trip and really our first look at what the government's priorities are. And we look forward to meeting with the various ministries and development partners to hear what those priorities might be. The way that GCF funds is through implementing partners or through accredited entities. Many of those are large UN-scale organisations, but we're also the only fund that is able to fund directly to the private sector. And in terms of the capacity building funding that we make available to governments, up to $7 million, we are also able to fund that directly into the government. The reason why we have partnered with some of the big agencies, international agencies, was because when we were started, really the first part of demonstrating that we were investing was to invest large amounts and quite quickly. And so we worked with implementing partners that had the ability to absorb large amounts and program that on the ground. In this second programming period of GCF, you'll see in our strategic documents that we are far more concerned with accrediting entities that are localised and based in the country so that we can be sure the money is being sent and used directly in the country for the benefit of local communities. That's a commitment that GCF has made to all countries to double the number of direct access entities. That means that whilst we may still fund, if it's the government's choice, to partner with UN agency, we are particularly looking to partner with organisations that are housed and resident within the country. We take corruption very, very seriously. So we have 2 independent mechanisms that operate, as I said, independently of GCF, an independent integrity unit and an independent redress mechanism. And any issues that arise are immediately tackled by those 2 independent bodies. The climate crisis is so huge that no dollar can go to waste. But we also believe that governments need to have the opportunity to build their capacity to put money in the system to demonstrate transparency, to demonstrate ethical programming, and to demonstrate impacts, and we are committed to that.
Yeah, thank you. As you have heard, all the development aid doesn't come directly to government. So this issue of the corruption index and all that kind of stuff with funds from GCF or JEF or other funding agencies, mostly the accredited entities to those organizations are the ones who implement these projects on behalf of the government. So we have to differentiate about the corruption index and whatever it is. So what we know that the government is developing the private finance management system, which is a good system. And one thing that we also need to know as South Sudanese, we only have one source of revenue, which is oil. And now the oil is not there for the last 6 months or so. That's why our economy is kind of like in crisis at the moment. But hopefully, when we look to the GCF projects, we'd like to make sure that they are a catalyst for us to be able to now look into the other sources of revenue, like agriculture, energy, and the rest, as a catalyst, but make sure that also we try to leverage more funding from private sector and all that kind of stuff. So we'll be looking into priorities and projects that will have domino effect. Yes. Like, let's look into clean energy generation, look into agriculture, and look into the capacity building. So our discussions will be based on that, but also trying to find which partner do we trust as government. At the moment, the Ministry of Environment has been building its systems. We had a HAC assessment and we have passed. So we can access funding directly from some of the donors that are there. So we'll also have that discussions with the Green Climate Fund. We know that in the end of this mission, we'll be having some projects that will be funded, definitely, like what they have done to Somalia. But the discussions have to be firmed up, and we have to know how are we going actually to make sure the money comes and goes directly to the impacted communities, building their resilience, such that they can restart their livelihoods. And that's the most important thing for us as government.
I think you make an excellent point, and I want to comment on risk. I think many organisations and agencies may consider countries like Sudan, South Sudan or Somalia or other partners as very high-risk environments. GCF sees these as high opportunity environments. Actually, the biggest risk is not to fund into climate vulnerable settings. Countries like South Sudan that are at the start of their development journey, that have extraordinary energy resources, extraordinary agricultural, extraordinary human resources, one of the youngest, fastest growing populations in Africa. South Sudan and the government has an incredible opportunity to leapfrog some of the mistakes, investment decision mistakes that other countries may have made, and to chart a green future. And this point about diversifying economy is absolutely critical, and we hope that green climate funding can be a catalyst to enable economy to grow in different areas and in a way that safeguards the future of this country and her people.
You know, during the conflict from 2013, all our development partners stopped development aid. They all went for humanitarian assistance. Mm-hmm. So what you're talking is humanitarian assistance. When I give you food, I give you a blanket, and I give you some oil and everything there, it's just for you to be alive. But the projects that we design with the Green Climate Fund is building the resilience. For example, with smart agriculture, we try to encourage you people or our people to be able to go to agriculture, but that agriculture is climate proof, okay? And even building some infrastructure like dikes or all that kind of stuff. So it's not only for humanitarian, but it will be development, peace through development, but not peace through humanitarian assistance. So those are projects that we'll be looking into. You might not see the impact at the same time, but making sure even for humanitarian or people who are impacted, like we can do planned relocation to higher ground. But this planned relocation is not simply, let's take people to that area, but we put the necessary conditions in those areas such that when they move there, they will be able to restart their livelihoods and that kind of stuff. But also the most important thing for us, it's a climate financing agency. We have to see how are we going to prove ourselves from the impacts of climate change. So whatever we have to do, we should have that climate action that will improve our livelihoods, but ensure that we are able to adapt to the conditions that we are facing at the moment.